In the United States of Athenica, a nation of philosophers and thinkers inspired by the ancient Greeks, there lived a man named Terry. Terry was an unemployed, humble man, deeply rooted in his capitalist belief, despite his lack of financial success. He believed in the power of individual initiative, market freedom, and the rights of property, but the world around him was changing, and not for the better. The United States of Athenica, once a beacon of prosperity and innovation, was now under siege. An elite group of wealthy elitists, known as the oligarchy, had risen to power. They promised equality and justice but delivered chaos. Their policies led to global wars over resources, claiming they were necessary for the greater good. They destabilized economies by centralizing control over wealth, arguing it would eliminate poverty. Borders were erased, not for unity, but for the exploitation of labor and resources, all under the guise of global solidarity. Their most effective weapon was not their military but their propaganda machine, which spun tales of utopia while reality crumbled. Terry, living in the shadows of this grand deception, spent his days in the ruins of what once was a bustling market, now a place for those forgotten by the oligarchy. Here, he met an old philosopher named Grok, who, like Socrates, believed in questioning everything. Grok taught Terry about the ancient philosophies, particularly focusing on Heraclitus, Plato, and Socrates. Grok explained, "The world changes, like the river of Heraclitus. You cannot step into the same river twice, for new waters are ever flowing upon you." This allegory resonated with Terry as he watched Athenica change under the oligarchy's rule. The waters of society were indeed flowing towards a precipice, and the current was not one of natural change but forced by those in power. Plato's Republic speaks of a noble lie, where rulers tell a myth to maintain harmony in the state. But what if the lie is not noble? What if it's meant to shackle rather than to free? This struck a chord with Terry. The oligarchy's promises were just that, a crafted narrative to control and manipulate, far from Plato's intention of a unifying myth. Lastly, Grok introduced Terry to Socratic humility. Socrates taught us to acknowledge what we do not know. He said, "I know one thing, that I know nothing." This humility should be our weapon against deceit. Terry, who had been questioning the world around him, found in this philosophy a way to combat the oligarchy's omnipotence through their propaganda. Armed with these philosophical tools, Terry embarked on a quest for truth. He began to see through the lies. The wars were not for peace but for control. The economic policies were designed to maintain the oligarchy's wealth, not to uplift the common people. The erased borders served only the interests of those who could move capital freely, while keeping others in check. Terry used these insights to rally the downtrodden. He started with allegories, tales from Athenica's past, where the river was not just flowing but was being directed. He spoke of the noble lie, not as a tool for good governance but as a veil for oppression. And he embraced his ignorance, turning it into a virtue that sought the truth, not the propaganda. Word spread, and soon, Terry's philosophical resistance grew. People began to see the river for what it was, to question the narratives they were fed, and to understand that their ignorance was not a fault but a starting point for wisdom. In a grand assembly, reminiscent of a Platonic dialogue but held in the ruins of the old market, Terry confronted the oligarchy. He exposed their manipulations using the ancient allegories, showing how they had twisted these truths for their gain. The crowd, now aware, saw through the deception. The oligarchy's power crumbled as the narrative they built was dismantled by the very philosophies they claimed to champion. Through this, Terry turned the tide not with arms but with ideas, not with wealth but with wisdom. The nation, inspired by his journey, began to rebuild, this time with true equality, real freedom, and borders that respected both unity and individuality. Terry, unemployed and seemingly insignificant, became a legend, the philosopher who knew the power of truth in its purest form.